Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This week, we're doing something necessary and, frankly, very difficult. We're examining the events that just completely shattered the community on College Hill.
We're looking at the mass casualty shooting at Brown University in Providence.
And the setting it's tragically familiar, isn't it? An academic building smack in the middle of final exams. It's a time of peak academic stress, students everywhere.
And on Saturday, December 13, 2025, that setting it was transformed into a horrific crime scene. We're talking 2 student fatalities, 9 others injured.
So for this deep dive, we've been going through the official critical incident review, operational reports, all the initial notes.
And our goal here for you is not just to recap a tragedy. We want to do a genuine forensic reconstruction. We're going to build out the minute-by-minute timeline of the actual attack.
And then we have to critique that response, right? There was a critical 17-minute gap in the emergency alert.
A huge gap. And from there, we have to transition into the investigative crisis that followed. I mean, the whole situation with the failed detention of that person of interest.
Right, and it's impossible to talk about this without the context. This isn't happening in a vacuum. The community was already dealing with the trauma from the shooting of Hisham al-Wartani back in 2023.
Exactly. That prior event meant the community was already raw. So you have this intersection of, rapid, overwhelming violence and this cumulative psychological damage.
It's a failure of infrastructure, a failure of protocol, a complete crisis of security.
It is. Our goal is to give you a really structured, detailed understanding of everything that happened up to Monday, December 15th, the moment the killer was officially confirmed to be at large, and investigators were, right back at the beginning.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at that moment, the timeline of the violence itself before, during, and in the immediate aftermath.
So, the setting. It's Saturday, December 13th, the second day of fall finals.
And the source material really zeroes in on the campus posture, classifying the Barouz and Hawley building as a, quote, soft target.
That classification is it's absolutely damning, isn't it? Barouz and Hawley, you have to understand, it's a massive 7-story complex. It's engineering, it's physics.
So lots of large lecture halls, lots of people.
Exactly. And the vulnerability wasn't an accident. It was kind of baked into the academic calendar.
But wait. If you have high student density for finals, shouldn't that be the exact moment you'd have the highest level of security? It seems so counterintuitive.
Logically, yes. But the university's whole operating philosophy, it prioritizes this idea of open academic access, and that actively worked against what you'd call hardened security.
So what does that mean in practice?
It means that while, sure, some of the big testing rooms might have required a badge to get in, the source material confirms the critical failure. The main exterior doors to the building were reportedly just unlocked. Unlocked. To make it easier for students to move between study groups, the library, review sessions, that kind of thing. So this open perimeter, while it's great for an academic environment, it provided zero resistance to a determined intruder.
This soft target challenge was realized because the attacker didn't have to breach anything. They just walked in.
Walked right in. And that open door policy, meant to help students, became a deadly security loophole.
And it led directly to Auditorium 166. So let's reconstruct that active phase. The sources say it was a terrifyingly short window, 4:05 to 4:22 p.m.
The shift from normal to chaos it was instantaneous. The very first 911 call hits Providence Emergency Services at precisely 4:05 p.m.
And at that moment, the assailant, described only as a male, dressed all in black, he enters the building and heads straight for the biggest group of people he can find.
Which was the economics review session in Auditorium 166.
And the witness accounts. They just describe this sudden, overwhelming eruption of violence. The forensics from the scene, that really gives us a chilling picture of the attack's intensity.
It does. Investigators recovered shell casings that indicate more than 40 rounds were fired.
More than 40.
More than 40 rounds from a 9mm handgun. And that sheer volume of fire in such a short time, that tells you 2 really important things about the perpetrator.
Yeah.
First, they were there to inflict mass casualties. This wasn't random. And second, they almost certainly used high-capacity magazines.
Like 30-round magazines?
Probably. Or maybe even extended ones. Something that would let them sustain that rate of fire without having to stop and reload constantly. Now, the review does note that 2 high-capacity magazines were recovered later.
But that's part of the investigative mess we have to get into later.
Exactly. The link there is it's complicated.
So you have over 40 rounds fired into a closed room in just a few minutes. The environment just descends into chaos.
Total chaos. We have the survivor accounts, and they are devastating. A sophomore, Annie Johnson, she estimated hearing about 10 gunshots before the room just dissolved into panic.
She described a stampede.
A stampede. And she highlighted that in the rush to get out of that direct line of fire, what they call the kill zone, students were literally being trampled. Your brain just switches from academic stress to pure survival.
But even in that chaos, the review also points to these incredible moments of altruism.
We really have to pause and talk about Spencer Yang. He's an 18-year-old student.
He was shot himself, right? In the leg.
Shot in the leg, and yet he makes this choice that just defies that instinct for self-preservation. He stayed. He tried to help another student who was more seriously injured.
He kept them conscious.
Kept them conscious, did what he could until law enforcement arrived. I mean, that is just a profound display of character under the most extreme pressure imaginable.
And the fear wasn't just in the auditorium. We have the account from Max McCord, whose roommate literally burst into their dorm room moments after it started.
Right, breathless from running from Baruz and Holly. It just shows you how fast that terror spread across the entire College Hill neighborhood.
The speed of the actual attack, probably less than 5 minutes of actual shooting, is what makes the official response so problematic.
And that brings us directly to the first major systemic failure here. The critical latency in the emergency alert system.
Okay, let's define this alert latency. Because 17 minutes in an active shooter situation, I mean, it's catastrophic. What was the protocol that allowed that kind of gap?
The timeline is it's unforgiving. So T-0, 4:05 p.m., the first 911 call confirms an active shooter. The university knows there is a credible lethal threat on campus. And yet the first official Brown alert, the message that tells the entire community to shelter in place, that doesn't go out until T+, 17 minutes at 4:22 p.m.
17 minutes. It's a massive vulnerability. I want to push on the sources here, though. The review says they were prioritizing bureaucratic vetting. What were they vetting? Were they trying to avoid a panic over what might have been a false alarm?
That is the core of it. The protocol, which was probably designed, in an era with fewer of these events, it prioritized validation. It assumed the first reports might be a prank call or something isolated that didn't need a full campus lockdown.
So it required multiple steps of approval.
Exactly. It probably had to go up a chain of command, maybe to the chancellor's office or a crisis manager, to get sign-off before they could send that alert out.
So the failure was putting bureaucratic confirmation ahead of an immediate credible report from the ground.
Precisely. And that operational failure was deadly because that 17-minute delay gave the perpetrator, in the report's words, considerable freedom of movement.
The review argues they have to accept a higher risk of false alarms.
They have to, because the alternative is sacrificing that critical window of shelter-in-place time. By the time that alert went out at 4:22, the shooter was almost certainly gone from the primary scene, and maybe even out of the neighborhood entirely.
And we have examples of this, right? Students who got the alert way too late.
We do. Teddy Fisher, who is in the science library basement, Mia Tretta in her dorm room. For them, the official warning wasn't a real-time instruction on how to stay safe. It was a historical confirmation of something terrifying that had already happened.
They were reacting to a concluded event.
Exactly. The review is very clear. This delay severely hampered the initial police response, which counts on the community locking itself down immediately to help contain the threat.
So after that late alert at 4:22, the manhunt begins. We're talking something like 400 officers from Providence PD, State Police, FBI, ATF. They just flood the area.
A massive saturation. They initiate a strict lockdown. But the sources describe this atmosphere of just complete panic, and that panic led to misinformation that started diverting all those resources.
The phantom gunfire phenomena?
Yes, exactly. It's captured in the chronology. At 5:27 p.m., so just over an hour after the real attack, this unverified report comes in about shots near Governor Street.
And that triggers a whole second wave of panic.
A huge secondary wave of alarm, and it means tactical resources have to be pulled away, right?
Right. Officers who should be securing the crime scene at Baruz and Holly, or locking down exit routes, they're suddenly racing across town.
And this went on for nearly an hour. It wasn't until 6:10 p.m. that the Governor Street report was officially called unfounded. That hour, chasing a ghost, it just significantly complicated the entire manhunt in those critical first few hours.
So you have the 17-minute alert delay, then you have resource diversion because of false alarms. The actual suspect had a massive head
A
start.
massive head start.
Let's move from the operational timeline to the human impact. The sources give us these detailed profiles of the two students who were killed and the diversity of their lives and dreams. It just underscores the random cruelty of it all.
The loss of Ella Cook and Mohammad Aziz Murzakoff, it just leaves this profound vacuum in the Brown community. And it's a loss that was felt both locally and internationally.
Let's start with Ella Cook. She was 19, a sophomore from Birmingham, Alabama.
Right. A high achiever. Her church described her as a grounded, faithful, bright light. And what really stands out in the sources is her level of engagement with campus life.
She was the vice president of the Brown College Republican.
He was. And that's a unique and sometimes challenging role to have in that kind of environment.
And the sources really emphasized that she was seen as a bridge builder, someone who worked to lift people up, especially, in a progressive Ivy League setting where conservative voices can sometimes feel isolated. Her death is seen as a real blow to the campus's ideological diversity.
It's just a reminder that this kind of violence, it doesn't care about your affiliations. It strikes people who are actively trying to shape the conversation of their generation.
The second fatality was Muhammad Aziz Murzakoff. He was only 18, a freshman, and his story is just one of incredible resilience.
Truly an immense journey. He was an international student from Uzbekistan, and to even get to Brown, he had to overcome these severe childhood medical issues. A neurological condition, a battle with scoliosis that meant he had to wear a back brace for years.
And his determination was just immense.
Absolutely. He was majoring in biochemistry and neuroscience. And his goal, his dream, was to become a neurosurgeon. It was clearly an ambition fueled by his own medical history.
And the way he died, it just underscores his character.
It does. He was killed while he was actively trying to help a friend during the chaos in that auditorium. His sister said he was the most kind-hearted person our family knew. He died with an act of selfless courage.
And his death had these global ripples. The U.S. ambassador to Uzbekistan, Jonathan Hynek, he issued a formal statement of condolence.
Which just shows you how this type of American campus violence is perceived overseas. For many people, these events define their perception of safety in the United States. It elevates it from a local tragedy to an international incident that forces a diplomatic response.
And beyond the two students we lost, we have to talk about the 9 who were injured. As of that Monday, 1 was still in critical condition, 7 others critical but stable.
And the recovery for them is it's a vast and complex road. You have the physical rehabilitation, of course. Spencer Yang's leg wound is a clear example of that.
But the expert reports really stress that the physical part is only half the battle.
It is. You're talking about the long-term psychological impact on those who survived, but were wounded, or who witnessed their friends die. The environment of fear, knowing the killer is still out there, that just accelerates the potential for complex PTSD.
Psychological wounds.
Exactly. The memory of the panic, the sound of the gunfire. It all requires a highly specialized long-term regimen of care. That support has to continue long after the physical wounds have healed. The university now has this profound responsibility to make sure that support is there.
That psychological distress was just massively amplified by this colossal investigative failure that played out in real time over that weekend.
It really was. As of Monday the 15th, the suspect is still unidentified, still at large. So let's look at how that electronic manhunt led them down this agonizing dead end.
With no clear face from the scene, they had to rely on digital forensics, right?
Immediately, FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed they deployed the Cellular Analysis Survey Team. And this is where the technical details really matter.
Okay, so we hear terms like tower dumps on TV shows, but what does that actually mean? How do they use that to find one person out of thousands on College Hill?
It's a massive, massive filtering exercise, and it's full of risk. They go to the cell providers and they ask for a tower dump, which is basically a list of all the unique electronic pings from mobile devices that connected to the cell towers, covering that Baruch and Holly area right around 4:05 p.m.
In a dense area like that, that must be thousands of signals.
Oh, yeah. 4, maybe 5,000 unique pings. It's an enormous digital haystack.
So how do they find the needle?
Their process is to cross-reference that huge list with all the known Brown student and staff IDs, resident addresses, verified devices. They're trying to isolate the anomalies.
The phones that don't belong there?
Exactly. And then they use triangulation measuring signal strength and timestamps across multiple towers to create this rough digital footprint of where that unknown device was and crucially, which way it went right after the shooting.
Sounds painstaking.
And very sensitive to error. But in this case, that process initially led them to what they thought was their guy.
It did. The analysis isolated a signal that was tracked moving fast away from College Hill, about 20 miles southwest.
It led them to a Hampton Inn in Coventry, Rhode Island. And that signal was the entire basis for the detention.
So on Sunday morning, tactical teams raid the hotel, and they detain Benjamin Erickson, a 24-year-old U.S. Army vet from Wisconsin. And the initial report sounded so confident.
They did. And that confidence was fueled by what they found. They seized a small Glock handgun with a laser sight, a revolver, and loaded magazines.
Laser sight, that was the key, right?
They thought it was. Law enforcement sources were saying the unique laser light on that Glock matched a vague witness description from the scene. So for investigators under all this pressure, you can see why it looks so good. A non-student 20 miles away with a gun that seems to match. They thought they had him.
But less than 24 hours later, late Sunday night, the whole narrative it collapses.
A total collapse. Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Noronha announces Erickson is being released. He says the evidence now points in a different direction. It was an absolute investigative nightmare.
A devastating retraction. It just guaranteed the community's fear would come roaring back. So what happened? Why did it fall apart?
The reasons are almost certainly forensic, and they speak directly to the danger of relying only on that digital tracking.
So with more than 49mm casings at the scene, what was the thing that proved his innocence?
The ballistic mismatch. It has to be the primary reason. Every firearm leaves a unique, microscopic signature, like a fingerprint, on the casings it ejects. It's from the rifling inside the barrel.
So they compare the casings from the scene to test-fired rounds from his gun.
Exactly. They run a detailed comparison of the striations. And if those two sets of microscopic marks don't match, it's definitive. A Glock found 20 miles away, even with a laser sight, cannot be the murder weapon.
And the second factor?
Alibi corroboration. His digital footprint, or even better, security footage from the Hampton Inn, likely proved he was at that hotel 20 miles away at 4:05 p.m. on Saturday. He couldn't be in two places at once.
The impact of this is it's immense. The investigation is forced back to square one.
And worse, the real perpetrator was given at least an extra 24 hours to get away, to destroy evidence, all while the manhunt was focused on a false lead in Coventry. It was a critical, time-consuming setback.
And it forced them to go back to asking the public for doorbell camera footage and tips.
Which is a clear admission that their high-tech lead had completely failed.
And all of this points to this overarching failure that handicapped them from the start. The university's lack of infrastructure, what Attorney General Noronha bluntly called the camera coverage gap.
Noronha's quote is just. It's an indictment. He said, there just weren't a lot of cameras in that brown building. That one deficit meant investigators were denied the gold standard of evidence, a clear, high-resolution image of the shooter's face, or even a license plate.
So instead of a clear image, they had to rely on vague witness descriptions and that flawed, risky cell data analysis.
Exactly. That lack of good CCTV forced them down that complicated multi-day cellular analysis path, which led them directly to the wrong guy. The surveillance gap is now a primary critique of the university's security strategy. It just shows that in a modern investigation, robust video isn't a luxury, it's a necessity.
To really understand the psychological weight on this community, we have to place this shooting in the context of what came before. The shooting of Hisham al-Rawatani in November 2023. This is a story of cumulative trauma.
This context is absolutely vital. The Burlington incident, it created this sense that violence could seek out Brown students specifically, based on their identity, even when they were miles from campus.
Let's just quickly review that. Hisham al-Rawatani and his friends were shot in Vermont during Thanksgiving break in 2023. They were targeted while wearing keffiyehs and speaking Arabic.
And Rawatani, a Brown student, was tragically paralyzed from the chest down. It required this immense overhaul of his life at Brown just to accommodate his new reality in a wheelchair, so that previous violence had already changed the feeling of safety for the entire student body.
And the man who did it, Jason J. Eaton, was charged with attempted murder. But the legal proceedings for his case are adding this surreal, traumatic layer to the current crisis.
That be the unnerving convergence, the sources point out. At the very moment the Brown campus was going into lockdown for this shooting, the legal case for the man who paralyzed al-Rawatani was reaching a critical, very public phase in Vermont.
The coincidence is just. It's striking. Eaton was scheduled for a status conference on Monday, December 15th at 8:30 in the morning.
The very day the Brown community woke up to find out the Providence killer was still in the loose.
So on that one day, December 15th, you have this dual trauma.
It's devastating. You have the active manhunt for the person who just killed two of your peers, and at the same time, this judicial reminder of the violence that permanently maimed another peer the year before. It creates this narrative of inescapable violence. It suggests that safety is just. It's an illusion.
And the sources highlight this generational crisis of violence through what they call the double survivor phenomenon.
This is where the statistics on mass shootings become intensely, tragically personal. Mia Tretta, a junior at Brown, she survived the 2019 Saugus High School shooting in California.
So when that Brown alert went out, the terror she had suppressed for years just came flooding back.
Her statement afterwards is just, it's haunting. She said, no one should ever have to go through one shooting, let alone two.
And she's not alone.
Not at all. Zoe Weissman, another student there during the Brown attack, is a documented survivor of the 2018 Parkland shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. For students like them, this isn't just grief. It's a specific kind of complex PTSD.
Where the university, the place they chose to be their safe haven, becomes a predictable trigger.
Exactly. It accelerates and intensifies their fear response way beyond that of a first-time victim. It shatters the university's safe space myth and confirms their worst fears, that the violence they fled in high school literally followed them to college.
And this environment, this hypervigilance, knowing the man in black is still out there. It's impossible to function academically.
Which is why they had to cancel the rest of final exams. It was a clear acknowledgement that the student body was just not in a state to function under that kind of sustained psychological pressure.
So this shooting, as intensely local as it was, has to be seen as part of this relentless national trend. The numbers themselves are an indictment.
They are. According to the Gun Violence Archive, this was the 389th mass shooting in the United States in 2025. That's not just a number. It means we're averaging nearly one mass shooting per day in this country. It's a normalization of this violence.
And the timing. It had this grim historical echo. This happened one day before the 13th anniversary of the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting.
That connection is so powerful. It links this generation of college students who were in elementary school in 2012 to a lifetime defined by active shooter drills. It frames this tragedy not as some freak event, but as the latest escalation in a generational experience of profound insecurity.
And in the immediate aftermath, you saw the predictable reactions. Local government, Mayor Smiley, Governor McKee, they focused purely on the manhunt.
Right. And the political condemnations followed the usual patterns. Advocacy groups like Sandy Hook Promise and Everytown immediately used the incident to renew calls for legislative action. They framed campus safety as the next frontier.
And on the other side, national political figures like President Trump offered condolences, but it signaled no immediate federal policy shift on gun control or campus security.
It's a familiar cycle.
So looking forward, the Critical Incident Review offers some really clear strategic imperatives.
Yeah.
The first one is about that catastrophic 17-minute latency.
That 17-minute gap requires a complete, immediate overhaul of their communication protocol. The review basically says that in an active shooter situation, bureaucratic vetting is a deadly liability.
So they need to decentralize.
They need to decentralize and streamline. Future protocols have to empower localized dispatchers the minute they get a credible report of gunfire to issue that shelter-in-place order instantly. No multi-step approval chains. The priority has to shift from certainty of threat to immediacy of community protection.
The second imperative gets at that camera coverage gap. It's this core challenge between hardening the campus and keeping it academically open.
It's a huge debate between soft and hard security. The need for investment to close that surveillance gap puts massive pressure on administrators. Do you move to metal detectors, turnstiles, badge-only access everywhere?
Which would kill the traditional open ethos of an Ivy League campus.
It would, but the sources suggest there's a middle ground, using technology.
AI-powered video analytics.
Exactly. It's a major investment, but it avoids those intrusive physical checkpoints. The tech uses machine vision, algorithms that are trained on huge data sets of weapon shapes, handguns, rifles, and aggressive behaviors.
So the cameras aren't just passively recording, they're actively searching for threats in real time.
That's the idea. The system is designed to spot an anomaly, like the distinct shape of a handgun, and send an immediate, prioritized alert to campus security, often faster than a student can even dial 911. It hardens the infrastructure without turning the campus into a fortress.
But there are trade-offs.
Of course. The high cost, the constant maintenance to prevent false positives, and, the inevitable privacy concerns that come with that level of monitoring.
And finally, we have to revisit the need for specialized long-term trauma support, especially with the Ortani case still casting such a long shadow.
The university has to prepare for what the report calls a long-tail mental health crisis. This means specialized counseling for complex PTSD, for survivor's guilt, and crucially, it has to be proactive, not reactive.
Because the trial in Vermont will keep bringing it all back up.
For months, maybe years. The university needs to schedule proactive outreach and specialized services around key trial dates and anniversaries to mitigate that recurring distress. They have to recognize that the outside world is going to repeatedly force these survivors to relive their trauma.
So to synthesize this,
Yeah.
we've seen the extreme speed and lethality of the attack.
Which proves that the 17-minute alert latency was just devastating. We've seen the consequence of that surveillance gap, which crippled the investigation from the very start.
And the high-profile retraction, the release of Benjamin Erickson, has left this premier institution grappling with the paralyzing fear of a known killer who is still at large.
The crisis on College Hill is this brutal, specific case study of how all the existing layers of security protocols, hardware, response times can still completely fail. It's made it undeniably clear that even with their prestige and resources, institutions like Brown remain profoundly vulnerable soft targets.
As this massive manhunt continues for the man in black, and as courts across the country are dealing with the fallout from prior campus trauma, this shooting leaves us with one unavoidable question.
It's a question for higher education leaders, for policymakers, for all of us, really.
Can the traditional open ethos of a major American university, that principle of free movement and access that defines higher learning, can it truly coexist with the reality of this level of pervasive, random violence that has plagued the nation's youth for over a decade?
That is the uncomfortable truth the Brown community is now living with.
And it's the profound question we leave for you to consider.